When I was getting ready to go to my daughter's for dinner, my lawyer texted me, "Call me immediately." I dialed his number. What he told me about my daughter shocked me. The scent of cedar hung in the air, a faint ghost of the closet where my suits had lived for decades. I adjusted the Windsor knot on my tie, my fingers moving with a slow, practiced motion. It was a familiar ritual for a Friday evening. At 68, routine becomes a kind of quiet friend. This tie, a deep navy blue with silver threads, had been a gift from my wife, Eleanor. I still remembered the day she gave it to me, her eyes crinkling at the corners as she said, "It matched the flecks of gray in my hair." Now, 2 years after she was gone, it was just me, the tie, and the silence of a house that was too big for one man. I walked down the hall, my dress shoes making soft sounds on the oak floors we had installed together. On the entryway table, her photograph sat next to a small bowl of keys. I paused, a habit I couldn't break, and straightened the silver frame. "I'm off to see Jessica," I whispered to the smiling woman in the picture. "I'll tell you all about Leo's soccer game when I get back." It was a silly thing talking to a photograph, but the silence never answered back with judgment. These Friday dinners were the last bright thread connecting me to the life we had built. They were a promise I kept to her and to myself that I wouldn't just fade away into the quiet grief. I reached for my charcoal gray suit jacket, the one I saved for these occasions. It felt good to make an effort to be the father Jessica could be proud of, the grandfather who showed up looking like he still had a place in the world. As my hand touched the wool sleeve, my phone vibrated on the table. A short, sharp buzz. I glanced at the screen, expecting a message from Jessica about what dessert to pick up. But the name was Sam Chen, my lawyer, my friend of 30 years. The message was just 5 words, but they landed with the weight of an anvil. "David, don't go anywhere. Call me immediately. Urgent." A cold knot formed in my stomach. Urgent wasn't a word Sam used lightly. My first thought was for him. A heart attack, an accident, his wife Mary. My fingers felt clumsy as I tapped his name and raised the phone to my ear. It rang twice before he picked up. His voice wasn't panicked. It was something worse. It was tightly controlled, stripped of all warmth. "David, are you alone?" he asked, his voice low. "Yes, Sam. I was just leaving for Jessica's." "What's wrong? Are you all right?" "I'm fine," he said, and the words offered no comfort. "Listen to me very carefully. Are you sitting down?" I sank onto the bench by the door, the jacket still clutched in my hand. "Sam, you're scaring me." He took a slow breath, the sound crackling over the line. "I should have called sooner. I've been reviewing your estate documents, the updates we made 6 months ago. As part of that, I requested comprehensive statements from your retirement funds, your investment accounts, the main portfolio." He paused. "David, there's a problem. A very big problem." I waited the silence, stretching. "The reports I've been getting look fine," I said, my own voice sounding distant. "Jessica sends them every quarter. The numbers are stable." "David," Sam said, and his voice was heavy with a sorrow that went beyond law. "The reports Jessica has been sending you are forgeries. They're doctored PDFs. The real statements from the banks tell a different story." The room seemed to tilt. The scent of cedar vanished, replaced by the metallic taste of fear. "What? What are you talking about?" "Over the last 2 years since Eleanor passed, someone has been systematically liquidating your assets. The brokerage account is nearly empty. The retirement fund has been drained through a series of structured withdrawals. Your life savings, the $3 million you retired with, it's almost all gone." Each word was a physical blow. $3 million. My entire life's work. The security I had built stone by painstaking stone for my retirement, for Eleanor's care, for my family's future. Gone. It didn't make sense. That's impossible, I stammered. No one can access those accounts but me. Sam's next words were quiet, but they shattered the world. That's not true, David. One other person can. The person holding your durable power of attorney. The one you signed at the hospital when Eleanor's illness got bad so someone could manage things if you couldn't. I didn't need him to say the name. There was only one person. The person I was about to go see for dinner. The person I trusted more than anyone else in the world. It's Jessica, Sam said, his voice a ghost. She's been bleeding you dry, and the phone nearly slipped from my hand. I leaned forward, my head in my hands, the polished oak floor swimming beneath me. My breath came in ragged gasps. It couldn't be. Not my Jessica. Not the little girl whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose college tuition I had paid without a second thought, whose wedding had been one of the proudest days of my life. My mind, a place that usually felt so orderly, so structured, became a whirlwind of fractured memories. Jessica sitting at my kitchen table a year ago, a stack of papers in front of her. "Don't you worry about a thing, Dad," she had said, her smile so bright and reassuring. "The market is volatile. I'll handle the logistics, make sure everything is protected. You just focus on healing." Another memory surfaced. Me mentioning a large, unexpected property tax bill. Jessica waving it off. "It's all taken care of, Dad. I moved some funds from the growth portfolio to cover it. It's all part of the plan." Her words had been a comfort then. Now they were weapons, each one a twist of the knife. The doctored reports she emailed every quarter, always with a cheerful note. The way she gently discouraged me from going to the bank myself, saying the tellers were new and the paperwork was a nightmare for someone my age. She wasn't protecting me. She was isolating me. She was building a cage of kindness around me while she looted the foundations of my life. Sam was still talking, his voice pulling me back from the abyss. "David. David, are you there? You need to listen to me. This is the most important part." I forced a sound from my throat. "Yes. You cannot let her know that you know. Do you understand me? You must go to that dinner. You must act as if nothing is wrong. Smile. Ask about Leo. Let her believe she is still in complete control. If she suspects anything, she could move the last of the money, hide it somewhere we can never find it. She could destroy records. We need time, David. I need time to trace where it all went. From this moment on, you are not just my friend. You are my client, and we are at war. A war she doesn't know has started. A war. The word echoed in the ruins of my heart. I was a retired engineer. I built bridges, not battle plans. But as I sat there, the weight of the betrayal pressing down on me, I felt something else underneath the shock. A cold, hard clarity. The engineer in me began to stir. A problem had been identified. The variables were unknown, the structure was failing. It was time to analyze the damage. Slowly, I pushed myself to my feet. My legs felt unsteady, like a building whose supports had been kicked out. I walked to the hall mirror and stared at my own reflection. The man looking back at me was a stranger. His eyes were wide with a pain so profound it seemed to have aged him 10 years in 10 minutes. His hand holding the phone was trembling. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I had to put this man away. I had to become someone else. Someone who could walk into his daughter's house, kiss his grandson's forehead, and sit at a dinner table laden with food bought with his stolen life and smile as if he hadn't a care in the world. "I understand," I said to Sam, my voice a hoarse whisper. "The performance begins now." I hung up the phone and stood there for a long moment, the silence of the house pressing in. I picked up the gray jacket from the bench. I slipped it on, straightened the collar, and smoothed the lapels. Then I walked out the door into the cool evening air, leaving the man I used to be behind in the empty house. The drive to Jessica's neighborhood was a journey through a world I had helped build but no longer belonged to. Here the houses weren't just homes. They were statements set back from the road behind manicured lawns and towering oak trees. My daughter lived in the largest one on the block, a modern palace of glass and white stone that seemed to glow from within as I pulled into the sweeping, circular driveway. The automatic gates slid open without a sound, a silent welcome into the heart of the lie. Tom was at the door before I even stepped out of the car, his smile wide and practiced. He was wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. "David, good to see you," he boomed, clapping me on the shoulder a little too hard. The gesture, which once felt like friendly affection, now felt like a claim of ownership. "You too, Tom," I said, my voice sounding unnervingly normal. I forced a smile onto my face, a brittle thing I was afraid might crack. As I stepped inside, the scale of their deceit hit me with the force of a physical blow. The entryway was a 2-story atrium with an Italian marble floor that gleamed under a modern chandelier resembling a burst of stars. The air smelled faintly of lilies and cedarwood, a scent designed to whisper wealth. Every surface was polished, every object perfectly placed. It was a beautiful house, a house built on the ruins of my life. Jessica emerged from the living room, a vision in a cream-colored silk dress. "Dad," she cooed, gliding towards me. "You made it." She wrapped her arms around me, a brief, cool embrace. It was the hug of a performer, not a daughter. I could feel the sharp corners of the diamond bracelet on her wrist press into my back. A bracelet I now realized that I had paid for. "You look a little tired," she said, pulling back to study my face, her eyes filled with a polished, professional concern. "Are you feeling all right?" "Just a long week, sweetheart." I managed to say the word sweetheart, tasting like ash in my mouth. She led me into the living room, a vast space with floor-to-ceiling glass walls that looked out onto an infinity pool and the twinkling lights of the Denver skyline. On the wall hung a massive abstract painting I recognized from a gallery she had pointed out to me a few months prior, mentioning its staggering price tag. On her finger, a sapphire ring glittered, one I'd never seen before. Each detail was a fresh stab of betrayal. Tom poured me a glass of sparkling water, while Jessica arranged herself on a white leather sofa. "My grandson Leo was at a sleepover," she explained. A pang of disappointment quickly followed by a strange sense of relief. I wasn't sure I could have faced his innocent eyes tonight. "We have some exciting news," Tom announced, handing me the glass. He gestured towards the driveway. "I finally traded in the old sedan. Got a new Porsche. It drives like a dream." "That's wonderful," I said, my voice hollow. I remembered the old sedan, a perfectly good Lexus I had helped him buy 3 years ago. Jessica smiled, the picture of a proud wife. "And my design firm just landed the contract for the new Fairmont Hotel downtown. It's a massive project, Dad. We're celebrating tonight." She lifted her wine glass in a mock toast. A toast to her success funded by my silent ruin. I had to clench my hand around my water glass to keep it from shaking. The dinner conversation was a masterclass in deflection and performance. They asked about my week, but their eyes glazed over when I spoke of pruning the roses. Their interest was a thin veneer. The real topic, as always, was them, their plans, their ambitions, their needs. Halfway through the meal, Jessica adopted the serious, caring tone that I now recognized as her most dangerous weapon. "Dad, I've been looking over your quarterly reports," she began, and I felt a chill despite the warmth of the room. "The market's a bit shaky. I was thinking maybe we should reevaluate your investment strategy. Move some of the more aggressive funds into something safer like long-term bonds. I just worry about you, and I want to make sure you're protected for the long haul." It was a brilliant move, a preemptive strike disguised as loving concern. She was offering to protect me from the very volatility she had created by draining my accounts. She was trying to consolidate her control, to lock down what little might be left. The audacity of it almost made me gasp. Sam's voice echoed in my head, "Act normal. Don't let her suspect a thing." I took a slow sip of water, buying a precious second to compose myself. I looked at her, my daughter, her face a perfect mask of filial devotion. "That's very thoughtful of you, honey," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "But there's no need. I have complete faith in how you're managing things. You've taken such a weight off my shoulders. I don't know what I'd do without you." The relief that washed over her face was almost imperceptible, but I saw it. A slight relaxing of her shoulders, a softening around her eyes. She had gotten the answer she wanted. My blind trust was still intact. She believed her perfect crime was still perfect. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. They talked about a summer trip to the Amalfi Coast, about upgrading the kitchen, about the private school they planned to send Leo to next year. Each word was another shovelful of dirt on the grave of my future, and I sat there nodding and smiling, playing the part of the proud, slightly senile father who was just happy to be included. It was the hardest performance of my life. The next morning, the sun rose over a city that felt alien to me. The familiar comfort of my home had been replaced by the cold awareness that I was living on a stage. Every action, every word had to be weighed and measured. The pain from the night before hadn't subsided. It had simply settled, hardening from a raw, open wound into a cold, dense weight in my chest. It was the weight of resolve. Sam Chen's office was a fortress of order and reason, a stark contrast to the chaos raging inside me. Bookshelves lined with leather-bound legal texts stood like silent sentinels from floor to ceiling. The air smelled of old paper, polished wood, and the strong black coffee Sam always had brewing. It was a room where problems were dismantled, analyzed, and solved with logic, not tears. Sam sat behind his large mahogany desk, his expression grim but focused. He looked like a general preparing for a long campaign. He was not alone. Sitting in the chair beside me was a woman who couldn't have been more than 30. Her name was Chloe. She had short, dark hair, eyes that seemed to miss nothing, and a stillness that was somehow more intimidating than any display of aggression. She didn't offer a comforting smile or words of sympathy. She simply nodded when Sam introduced her as the best forensic accountant he knew, and her gaze met mine with a look of quiet professional intensity. She was here to analyze a disaster, and my life was the wreckage. "David," Sam began, his voice leaving no room for pleasantries. "After you left last night, Chloe and I worked through the initial data. What Jessica is doing is not just opportunistic. It's a calculated, systematic campaign." He pushed a preliminary chart across the desk. It was a spiderweb of lines and arrows connecting my accounts to shell corporations and high-risk investments. My life reduced to a diagram of theft. "I saw it last night," I said, my voice flat. "The house, the car, the jewelry. It's all there. My money." "It's worse than that." Chloe spoke for the first time. Her voice was as precise and unadorned as her appearance. She's not just spending it. She's moving it, hiding it, funneling it through a shell company, Elysian Designs LLC, and then into a high-risk resort development in Mexico that your son-in-law is managing. She's laundering your life savings, Mr. Miller. And she's using the doctored financial reports to keep you placated while she does it. Sam leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. This is no longer a family dispute, David. This is a criminal enterprise, and we will treat it as such. Here is the plan. It's a two-phase operation. He took a sip of his coffee and laid out the blueprint for my counterattack. Phase 1 is information warfare. Chloe will work in the shadows. She will trace every dollar, every transfer. She'll build a map of their entire financial network. At the same time, I will be using legal subpoenas to demand the original untampered records from every bank and investment firm. We will build an arsenal of undeniable proof. He looked at me, his eyes serious. Your role in this phase is the most difficult. You must continue the performance. You are the grieving widower, the aging father, a little confused, a little overwhelmed by the modern world. You will call her, ask for her help with small things. Let her believe her control is absolute. We need her to be comfortable. We need her to be arrogant. Arrogance makes people careless. I nodded, the engineer in me appreciating the cold logic, even as the father in me recoiled at the thought of the deception. That brings us to phase 2, Sam continued. The trap. He looked at Chloe, who picked up the narrative seamlessly. Your daughter has grown accustomed to a steady stream of liquid assets she can manipulate. Chloe explained, her gaze fixed on me. She believes the house is the final prize, the largest, most illiquid asset that she will simply inherit upon your passing. She's not expecting it to ever be in play. We're going to put it in play. The plan was simple in its design and brutal in its intent. I was to leak a piece of information. I would confide in a mutual friend, someone I knew was a notorious gossip, that I was feeling lonely and overwhelmed. I would mention that I was seriously considering selling the house and all its contents to move into a luxury retirement community in Scottsdale, Arizona, to live out my days in the sun. The news of a potential sale will trigger a panic. Chloe stated, her tone flat, analytical. It threatens her inheritance, and more importantly, it threatens to bring in outside parties, realtors, appraisers, lawyers who will scrutinize the very finances she has worked so hard to conceal. Her cash flow from your accounts is likely slowing as the funds run out. The house is the endgame. She cannot and will not let it be sold. She will be forced to act, Sam concluded, taking the reins again. She'll try to stop you. She'll double down on her claims that you're confused, that you're not fit to make your own decisions. She will overplay her hand. And when she does, she will walk directly into the legal cage we have built for her, armed with every piece of evidence of her fraud. I sat there absorbing the chilling brilliance of their strategy. It was a plan built not on emotion, but on a deep understanding of my daughter's greed. It used her own arrogance as the bait. For 2 years, my passivity had enabled her. Now, a different kind of passivity, a feigned confusion, would become the weapon for her undoing. The pain was still there and a cold stone in my gut, but for the first time since that fateful phone call, it was joined by something else. The quiet, satisfying click of a well-designed machine being set into motion. The days that followed were a quiet, nerve-wracking performance. I became an actor in the theater of my own life, and every word, every gesture was part of a script written in the cold, clear ink of my lawyer's office. The first move was deceptively simple. On Tuesday morning, I called Jessica. I deliberately waited until 10 o'clock, a time I knew she would be in the middle of a meeting, a time when my call would be an interruption. "Dad?" She answered, her voice carrying a faint edge of annoyance. "Is everything all right?" I let out a sigh. A weary sound I had practiced in front of the mirror. "Oh, honey, I'm sorry to bother you. It's just these papers from the insurance company. They're talking about beneficiaries and probate, and the words are all swimming in front of my eyes. Your mother used to handle all of this." I let my voice trail off, planting the seed of my manufactured incompetence. Her annoyance softened, replaced by that familiar, patronizing tone. "Of course, Dad. Don't you worry about it. Just leave them on your kitchen table and I'll swing by this afternoon to sort them out for you." "You're a lifesaver, sweetheart," I said. "My head's just not what it used to be." It was a lie, and it felt like swallowing glass, but I knew it was necessary. I spent the rest of the morning at home waiting. When she arrived, I had a cup of her favorite tea ready. We sat at the kitchen table while she briskly organized the papers, explaining them to me in simple terms, as if I were a child. As she was leaving, I executed the second part of the move. "Oh, shoot," I said, patting my pockets with feigned panic. "I must have left my wallet in your car the other night. How silly of me." "It's fine, Dad," she said, already halfway out the door. "I'll check for it. Just be more careful." The door closed and I stood in the silence, my real wallet resting heavy in my back pocket. I had just given myself a perfect excuse to visit her home unannounced. The main gambit was set for Thursday. I had arranged to have lunch with Arthur Gable, a man I'd known for 40 years. We were friends, but more than that, Arthur was the unofficial news hub of our social circle. A story told to Arthur at noon would be common knowledge by dinner. We met at our usual spot, a quiet diner that served the best Reuben sandwich in Denver. We talked about the old days, about our health, about our grandchildren. It was all so normal, so comfortable that the lie I was about to tell felt like a deep betrayal of that friendship. But Sam's words echoed in my mind. "This is a campaign." "You know, Arthur," I began stirring my iced tea. "This big house, since Eleanor's gone, it's just so empty. The upkeep is getting to be too much for an old man." Arthur nodded sympathetically. "It's a lot to handle alone, David." I sighed again, letting my shoulders slump. "I've been thinking. A friend of mine moved into a place in Scottsdale, Arizona. One of those high-end retirement communities. Golf course, swimming pool, catered meals. No lawns to mow, no roofs to fix." I laughed a small, sad laugh. "He says all he has to do is decide what to have for dinner. Sounds like a dream, doesn't it?" I planted the seed, watering it with a believable mix of exhaustion and longing. I'd have to sell the house, of course. Liquidate everything. But what's the point of rattling around in a mausoleum? Arthur's eyes widened slightly. I saw the gears turning. This was news, big news. He promised to keep it to himself, but we both knew that was a promise he was incapable of keeping. I left the diner feeling a grim sense of accomplishment mixed with the sour taste of having used a friend. While I was playing the part of the weary retiree, Chloe was deep in the digital trenches. That afternoon, she sent a secured update to Sam, who forwarded it to me. Her findings were chilling. The shell company Elysian Designs LLC wasn't just a holding account. It was the primary investor in a luxury seaside resort project near Cancun, Mexico. A project that was, according to public records, massively over budget and plagued by construction delays. The manager of the project's finances was listed as Tom, my son-in-law. They weren't just spending my money on cars and jewelry. They were gambling it away on a failing enterprise, desperately trying to keep it afloat with the last of my life savings. They needed the house not just for the inheritance, but as a final desperate injection of capital to save them from ruin. The phone call came at 6:15 p.m. that evening. I had just sat down with a bowl of soup. The caller ID flashed Jessica's name. I let it ring 3 times before answering, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Dad?" Her voice was a tight coil of feigned concern. "Arthur Gable just called me. He said you're thinking of selling the house and moving to Arizona." I adopted my most tired, confused voice. "Oh, was I not supposed to mention that Arthur and I were just talking? It's just an idea, honey. This place is so much work." "Sell the house," she repeated, her voice rising an octave. "Dad, you can't. You just can't. That's our family home. It's where Mom's memories are. Every room, every corner. How could you even think of letting it go?" The performance was flawless. The grief, the sentimentality, it was all there. But I could hear the sheer panic humming beneath the surface. "I'm just getting old, Jessie," I said, using her childhood nickname to add a touch of vulnerability. "I can't keep up with the repairs, the yard. I thought maybe it's time for an easier life. Somewhere with a bit of sun." No, she said quickly. "We can figure this out. If it's the upkeep, we can hire a service. A full-time gardener, a handyman. I can manage it for you. You don't have to lift a finger. Just don't make any rash decisions. Don't call a realtor. Promise me, Dad. Promise you'll let me help you manage this." Her words were a desperate scramble to regain control, to put herself between me and the one asset she couldn't afford to lose. She wasn't trying to save my memories of her mother. She was trying to save her failing investment in Mexico. The conversation ended with my vague, non-committal promise to think about it, leaving her dangling in a state of high anxiety. I hung up the phone and stared out the window into the darkening evening. The soup in front of me had gone cold. A grim smile touched my lips. The trap was set. The bait had been taken, and my daughter, my clever, calculating daughter, was now thrashing in the net, completely unaware that the fisherman was the tired old man she thought she had already devoured. The silence that followed my phone call with Jessica was a different kind of quiet. It was the calm of a chessboard after a decisive move has been made, a quiet humming with the anticipation of the opponent's response. I knew it wouldn't take long. Panic is a poor strategist. It always acts too quickly. 2 days later, on a Saturday afternoon, she called. Her voice was smooth, almost syrupy. "Dad, Tom and I were just in the neighborhood. We'd love to drop by for a few minutes. I've been talking with my financial advisor, and he put together a simple portfolio projection for you. I think it will really put your mind at ease about the house." "Of course, honey," I said, my voice a well-rehearsed instrument of weary acceptance. "The door's always open." The stage was set. I had an hour before they arrived. I moved with the unhurried precision of an engineer checking blueprints before a major build. My target was a small, decorative birdhouse Eleanor had kept on the mantelpiece. It was a silly, sentimental thing, but its position gave it a clear acoustic line to the main sofa. I turned it over. The base was hollow. The recording device Sam had given me was no bigger than a sugar cube, a tiny black square with a single, almost invisible lens. I secured it inside the birdhouse with a piece of double-sided tape, then placed the house back on the mantel, adjusting it by a fraction of an inch. From the outside, it was just a piece of decor. From the inside, it was a silent, waiting witness. They arrived looking like a power couple from a magazine cover. Jessica wore a sharp, tailored blazer, and Tom had on a polo shirt with a small embroidered horse on the chest. They carried a thick, leather-bound folder. It was all part of the performance, a show of professionalism and authority, designed to make me feel small and out of my depth. "Dad," Jessica began, her voice dripping with concern, as she sat opposite me, placing the folder on the coffee table between us. We were so worried after our last conversation. Tom and I talked it over, and we really think selling the house is a terrible mistake, both emotionally and financially. She opened the folder. Inside were pages of colorful charts, graphs, and dense paragraphs of text. I had our advisor, Mr. Albright, run the numbers. See, she pointed to a bar chart. The market is trending down. If you sell now, you'll be losing at least 15% of the property's peak value. It's just not a smart time to liquidate such a major asset. I leaned forward, squinting at the pages, as if they were written in a foreign language. Oh my, that's a lot of numbers, Jessica. It all looks so complicated. It is, Dad, but that's what we're here for, Tom chimed in, leaning forward earnestly. We can help you navigate this. Jessica's brilliant with this stuff. We just don't want to see you make a decision you'll regret. I shook my head, waving a dismissive hand at the folder. I don't know, kids. All I know is that the yard is too big, the stairs are getting steeper, and Arizona sounds nice and simple. No charts, no portfolios, just sunshine. I was deliberately being the stubborn, simple-minded old man they wanted me to be. I could see the frustration flicker in Jessica's eyes before she masked it with another patient smile. Let's just put the numbers aside for a moment, she said softly. Think about Mom. Think about the memories in this house. The garden she planted, the kitchen where we all cooked Thanksgiving dinner. You can't sell that, Dad. You just can't. The appeal to emotion was her trump card, the one she always played when logic failed. Hearing her use Eleanor's memory as a tool of manipulation sent a shard of ice through my heart. I needed to get out of the room before my own mask cracked. I pushed myself up from my chair slowly. You've given me a lot to think about. Let me make us some tea. My head is spinning a bit. As I walked toward the kitchen, I knew the real performance was about to begin. The moment the sound of me filling the kettle reached the living room, their pretense would drop. I stood just out of sight, my back against the wall, my own breathing silent. I counted the seconds. Then I heard Tom's voice, a low, anxious whisper. You don't think he'll actually sell, do you, Jessica, the project in Mexico? The investors are getting nervous. We need another capital injection, and we need it last month. There was a rustle of paper, then Jessica's voice, no longer soft and cloying, but cold and sharp as forged steel. He won't sell, she hissed. I won't let him. He's more confused than I thought. This whole Arizona fantasy is proof. But what if he just calls a realtor? What do we do? Tom's voice was thin with panic. A pause. Then came the words that stopped my heart. Then we take the next step, Jessica said, her voice devoid of any emotion. I'll prove he's not competent to make that decision. I'll talk to Dr. Miller again, get a more definitive assessment. The power of attorney isn't enough to stop a sale if he's determined. We need a conservatorship. We need full control. It's the only way to protect our interests, to protect the family. Protect the family. The lie was so profound, so complete, it was almost a work of art. I stayed in the kitchen for another 5 minutes, my hands gripping the edge of the counter until my knuckles were white. I made a show of clattering cups and spoons before walking back into the living room with a tray of tea I had no intention of drinking. They were sitting in silence. When I returned, the leather folder closed, their faces composed into masks of loving concern once more. They left soon after, promising to call, promising to help in any way they could. The moment their car pulled out of the driveway, I walked to the mantelpiece. My hand was shaking as I retrieved the tiny recording device from the birdhouse. I sat in my armchair, the one Eleanor always called my thinking chair, and plugged the device into my phone with an adapter. I pressed play. The sound of my own voice feigning confusion filled the silence. Then their whispers. Tom's panic. And finally, my daughter's voice clear and cold, plotting to have me declared mentally incompetent, plotting to seize control of everything I had left. We need a conservatorship. I listened to the recording twice. The first time my heart shattered into a million pieces. The sound of my own child planning my legal execution was a pain beyond description. But the second time I listened, something else happened. The engineer inside me, the man who built bridges and understood stress points and structural integrity, took over. The pain was still there, but it was being encased in something harder, colder. The raw emotion was cooling, hardening into the clean, sharp lines of a blueprint. The heartbreak was immeasurable. But the evidence was undeniable. She had said it. He had confirmed the motive. Their masks were off, and their true faces were now captured in a digital file. My daughter had just handed me the weapon I would use to dismantle her world. I had proof of intent. The war had truly begun. The days following that confrontation were a strange sort of limbo. I existed in a state of suspended animation, going through the motions of my life, while a war was being plotted in the quiet corners of my mind and in the secure servers of Chloe's office. I pruned the roses. I read the newspaper. I played the part of David Miller, retired engineer. But every time the phone rang, my heart seized. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, and I knew it would not be a gentle landing. The call came on a Wednesday morning. The sky was a flat, indifferent gray. It was Sam. His voice was devoid of all preliminary chatter. "David," he said, "it's here. They filed it this morning." I didn't have to ask what it was. "Tell me," I said, sinking into my thinking chair. "A petition for conservatorship." Sam read from the document, his voice a steady legal drone that made the obscene words sound even colder. Filed by Jessica Miller, petitioner, regarding David Miller, respondent. The petition alleges a significant and recent cognitive decline, citing, let's see, erratic behavior, memory loss, and poor financial judgment. My hand tightened on the armrest. Poor financial judgment. Yes. Sam continued, his tone unwavering. The primary evidence cited is your sudden and irrational decision to liquidate your primary residence, which they claim puts you at grave risk of financial destitution and homelessness. They're painting the very idea you leaked as proof of your incompetence. I closed my eyes. They were twisting my own bait and trying to hang me with it. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush that spread from my chest to my face. My own daughter telling a court of law that I had lost my mind. "It gets worse," Sam said, his voice hardening. "The petition includes several supporting declarations. There are sworn statements from two of her concerned friends. I've already run their names. David, they're both investors in Tom's Mexico project. They testify that during recent social encounters you appeared confused, disoriented, and emotionally volatile." "I've never met these people in my life." I whispered the words, barely audible. "I know," Sam said. "And to cap it all off, there's a preliminary psychological evaluation. It's signed by a Dr. Alan Miller, no relation, I checked. He states that based on a brief, informal conversation arranged by Jessica, he has serious concerns about your ability to manage your own affairs. It's a paid opinion, David. A piece of medical theater designed to look legitimate." I felt the air leave my lungs. It was a comprehensive character assassination, a legal document designed to strip me of my name, my autonomy, my very identity as a competent adult. They were trying to turn me into a non-person, a ward of the state, all so they could have unrestricted access to the last of my assets. The front door of my house, the car in my driveway, the thoughts in my own head, none of it would be mine anymore. It was the final, deepest betrayal, a public declaration that my life as I knew it was over. For a moment, the engineer's cold resolve vanished, replaced by the raw, wounded heart of a father. They were going to win. The lie was just too big, too well constructed. "Sam," I began, my voice cracking. "How do we fight this? They have a doctor. They have witnesses." Then I heard it. A sound I hadn't heard from Sam in years. A low, humorless chuckle. It was the sound of a predator that had just watched its prey walk into a perfectly laid trap. "Fight it!" Sam's voice was suddenly alive, infused with a cold, thrilling energy. "David, we're not going to fight it. We're going to welcome it. This isn't a setback. This is the end game. This is exactly what we were waiting for." I was silent, trying to understand. "Don't you see?" He explained, his voice sharp with strategic glee. "She has taken her private, hidden fraud and dragged it into a public courtroom. She has willingly placed her actions, her motives, and her credibility before a judge, all based on a lie we fed her. She thinks she's putting your mind on trial. What she's actually done is put her entire criminal enterprise on the witness stand." He took a breath, and I could practically feel the smile forming on his face. "She's filed the paperwork. She's brought in paid witnesses. She's built a house of cards on a foundation of pure sand. This is the moment we've been working towards, David. The trap has been sprung. She did it herself." I listened, and slowly the fog of humiliation began to clear, replaced by a cold, rising fury. Sam was right. This wasn't their victory. This was their final, fatal mistake. "So what now?" I asked, my own voice finding its strength again. "Now," Sam said, and his voice was the sound of a gavel falling. "We let her walk into that courtroom believing she's in control. We will let her present her case. And then we will dismantle it piece by piece with bank records, with audio recordings, with Chloe's entire financial map of her fraud. We will show the court who has been making the irrational financial decisions." He paused, letting the weight of his final words land. "She has petitioned the court to determine if you are competent. Fine. Now we are going to show that court who the truly incompetent one is." The weeks leading up to the conservatorship hearing were a blur of methodical, relentless preparation. The initial shock had receded, leaving in its place a cold, clear purpose. The machine of justice, once a distant and abstract concept, was now humming to life in the quiet rooms of Sam's office and in the determined silence of my own home. We were no longer reacting. We were building a case so solid, so irrefutable, that it would collapse the world my daughter had built on lies. We worked on 3 separate fronts, each of us a soldier, in a quiet war. Chloe's front was a digital battlefield of numbers and transactions. In her sterile, minimalist office, surrounded by glowing monitors, she became the architect of Jessica's downfall. Day after day, she pieced together the scattered fragments of my financial life. What she finally produced was not just a report. It was a weapon. A document nearly 3 inches thick, bound in stark black, its pages filled with meticulously organized evidence. There were color-coded charts that showed the steady outflow from my retirement accounts and corresponding charts showing the identical inflow into the Elysian Designs LLC. There were timelines that mapped every major withdrawal to a significant purchase made by Jessica or Tom, a new car, a down payment on a second property, a lavish European vacation. The centerpiece was a breathtakingly complex flowchart, a map of the crime, as Chloe called it, showing how my money was funneled through the shell company invested in the failing Mexican resort, and then in some cases cycled back into their personal accounts under the guise of management fees. It was a masterpiece of financial forensics, a story of grand larceny told in the cold, unforgiving language of spreadsheets and bank statements. Sam's front was the law itself. He transformed his office into a war room. I would visit him and find him surrounded by stacks of legal books, yellow sticky notes flagging key precedents and statutes. He was constructing the legal framework of our case, building the arguments that would turn Chloe's data into a legal verdict. He printed out sections of the Colorado state law on elder financial abuse, highlighting the specific clauses that defined it not just as theft, but as a breach of fiduciary duty, a betrayal of trust. He prepared cross-examination questions for Jessica's paid witnesses, designed to expose their financial ties to her and Tom. He drafted motions to compel to subpoena, to ensure that no stone was left unturned. He was building our shield and sharpening our sword, preparing to walk into that courtroom, not just to defend me, but to prosecute them. My front was perhaps the quietest, but also the most personal. It was the battle for my own sanity in the eyes of the law. The court had appointed an independent psychiatrist, a Dr. Evelyn Reed, to conduct a competency evaluation. I met her in a calm, sunlit office that smelled of tea and old books. Jessica had painted a picture of me as a confused, irrational old man. I decided the most powerful counter-argument was simply to be myself. I did not speak of the fraud or the betrayal. Instead, I spoke about my life. I told her about my career as a civil engineer, about the bridges I helped design, the complex calculations for load-bearing structures, the water management systems I had overseen for the city of Denver. I spoke with the precision of a man who had spent 40 years of his life making sure things didn't fall down. I described my daily routine, my budget, the way I managed my household expenses down to the penny. Dr. Reed listened, her expression unreadable, asking sharp, insightful questions. At the end of our second session, she closed her notebook and looked at me. "Mr. Miller," she said, "based on our conversations and the tests I've administered, you are one of the most cognitively sound and methodical individuals I have evaluated this year. The decision to sell your house from a purely logical standpoint of simplifying one's life in retirement is anything but irrational. And we were building our case brick by solid brick. But it was Chloe in the final days before the hearing who found the crack in the foundation, a crack that would bring the entire rotten structure crashing down." She called Sam on a Tuesday night. I was at his office reviewing my testimony. Sam put the call on speakerphone. Chloe's voice was different. The usual professional calm was replaced by something else, a quiet, contained horror. "Sam David," she began. "I was doing a final cross-reference of Eleanor's estate documents, specifically her life insurance policies, just to ensure we had a complete picture. I found something." She explained that Eleanor had a significant life insurance policy, one that she had designated years ago to be paid into a trust for our grandson Leo's college education. "But," Chloe continued, her voice tight, "I found an amendment form, a change of beneficiary request. It was filed 3 weeks before Eleanor passed away. The primary beneficiary was changed from the Leo Miller Educational Trust to Jessica Miller, daughter." A cold dread washed over me. I remembered Eleanor in those last weeks, weak, often disoriented from the pain medication. "There's more," Chloe said. "I've looked at dozens of Eleanor's signatures from over the years, checks, legal documents, letters. Her signature was always strong, elegant. The signature on this form, it's shaky, but it's also wrong. The angle of the E is off. The loop on the R is too tight. It looks less like the signature of a sick person and more like the signature of a person trying to imitate someone else." The room went silent. The implications were monstrous. This wasn't just about stealing from a living father. This was about stealing from a dying mother. It was about stealing her last gift to her own grandchild. Sam stood up and walked to the window, his back to me. For a long moment he said nothing. When he turned around, his face was a mask of cold fury. He picked up his phone. "Chloe," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Send me a high-resolution scan of that signature immediately." He paused, then dialed another number. "Yes, this is Sam Chen," he said into the phone. "I need to speak to Daniel Ishikawa. Tell him it's an emergency. I need an expert opinion on a potential forgery, and I need it yesterday." He hung up and looked at me, his eyes blazing. "The terrible truth just got a whole lot worse, David. But so did our case." The courtroom was a world of polished wood and hushed reverence, a place where life-altering decisions were made under the impassive gaze of the state seal. The air was thick with a tension that felt heavier than sound. I sat beside Sam, my hands resting on my knees, my back straight. I was not a defendant, but I felt as though my entire life was on trial. Across the aisle, Jessica sat with Tom, her expression a carefully crafted mask of daughterly concern. She looked every bit the part of the hero, the one stepping in to save a father from himself. Her lawyer, a man with silver hair and a voice as smooth as his suit, began first. He painted a masterful picture of my decline. He spoke of a loving daughter worried about a father lost in grief, a man making sudden, irrational decisions that threatened his own well-being. He called his first witness a so-called family friend who recounted a recent conversation where I had seemed terribly confused and obsessed with a bizarre plan to move away. Then he called the next another of Jessica's business associates who described my behavior at a charity event as distracted and emotionally fragile. It was a flawless, damning performance. To anyone who didn't know the truth, I was exactly who they claimed I was, a broken old man who needed saving. When it was Sam's turn, the energy in the room shifted. He did not rise with fire and fury. He rose with the quiet, deadly calm of a man who knew he held all the cards. "The petitioner has painted a picture of a man in cognitive decline," he said, his voice filling the room. "We would like to begin by presenting the court with a more accurate assessment." He didn't call me to the stand. He called Dr. Evelyn Reed. The court-appointed psychiatrist took her seat, a picture of professional neutrality. Sam walked her through her evaluation of me. "Dr. Reed," he asked, "in your expert opinion, did you find Mr. Miller to be suffering from any cognitive impairment that would render him incapable of managing his own affairs?" Dr. Reed looked directly at the judge. "Quite the opposite, counselor," she stated, her voice clear and firm. "Mr. Miller exhibits exceptional cognitive function for a man his age. His memory is precise, his reasoning is sound, and his understanding of complex financial and logistical matters is frankly superior to that of most of my clients. He is, in my professional opinion, fully competent." A quiet murmur rippled through the courtroom. I saw Jessica's back stiffen. The first brick in her wall of lies had just been pulled loose. "Next," Sam announced, "the prosecution calls Chloe Armstrong." Chloe walked to the stand with the same quiet confidence I had seen in Sam's office. She was sworn in, and a large screen flickered to life behind her. "Ms. Armstrong," Sam began, "you are a forensic accountant. Could you please explain to the court what this chart represents?" For the next 45 minutes, Chloe methodically, clinically, and devastatingly dismantled Jessica's entire narrative. With the aid of the projector, she walked the court through the map of my stolen life. She showed the steady monthly withdrawals from my accounts. She showed the identical deposits into the shell company Elysian Designs, LLC. She showed the photographs of Tom's Porsche, of Jessica's jewelry, of their lavish vacations, with dates that corresponded perfectly to the largest withdrawals. The courtroom was utterly silent, captivated by the cold, hard story the numbers were telling. Jessica's face had gone pale. Tom was staring at his hands, unable to look up. Then Sam played the audio recording, my voice feigning weariness. Tom's anxious whisper about needing more capital for the Mexico project. And finally, Jessica's voice, sharp and cold, slicing through the courtroom's silence. If I have to, I'll prove he's not competent to make that decision. The power of attorney isn't enough. We need a conservatorship. We need full control. A collective gasp went through the room. The mask of the loving daughter had been torn away, revealing the cold face of a predator. Jessica sank lower in her chair, her eyes wide with disbelief, as if she couldn't comprehend that her own words had returned to condemn her. Sam let the silence hang for a long moment before delivering the final, fatal blow. He turned to the judge, his voice now resonating with a righteous anger he had kept contained until this moment. "Your Honor," he said, his voice ringing with clarity. "What you have seen here is a story of profound greed and betrayal. But the terrible truth is that this story is even darker than it appears. This is not just about the abuse of a living father. This is a plot that began when this woman's own mother was on her deathbed." He called his final witness, Mr. Daniel Ishikawa, a renowned handwriting expert. Sam placed a document on the projector, the life insurance amendment. "Mr. Ishikawa," Sam asked, "can you tell the court about the signature of Eleanor Miller on this document?" The expert adjusted his glasses. "The signature of Eleanor Miller on this page is a forgery," he stated unequivocally. "While it mimics her letter forms, it lacks the natural speed and pressure of a genuine signature. It shows signs of slow, careful drawing. It is not the signature of a frail, sick woman. It is the signature of a healthy person attempting to copy a signature they have studied." The courtroom felt as if all the air had been sucked out of it. Sam presented his final exhibits, the official insurance payout confirmation, showing a 7-figure sum deposited directly into Jessica's personal account weeks after Eleanor's death. And a final damning document from the state registrar, no entity named the Leo Miller Educational Trust had ever been filed or created. She hadn't just stolen from me. She had stolen her dying mother's last gift to her own son. That was the moment everything broke. Tom, who had been pale and still, slowly turned his head to look at his wife. The expression on his face was not one of anger, but of pure, unadulterated horror. He was a thief, but he had not known he was married to a monster. He was seeing her, truly seeing her for the first time, and the sight was breaking him. But it was Jessica who truly shattered. The intricate web of lies, the carefully constructed facade, the years of manipulation, it all came crashing down on her at once. A sound escaped her throat, a choked, guttural sob. Her mask of composure didn't just crack, it disintegrated. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders heaving in great wrenching sobs. The brilliant, controlled strategist was gone, replaced by a common thief, caught in the act, her crimes laid bare for the entire world to see. And in that moment, in the ruins of her deception, the final judgment was rendered not by the judge, but by the cold, inescapable weight of the truth. The sound of Jessica's sobbing was the only thing that filled the courtroom, as the judge, a woman with eyes that had seen too much to be easily shocked, delivered her ruling. Her voice was cold steel. "The petition for conservatorship is denied," she declared, her gaze fixed on Jessica. "What has been presented here today is not a case of a daughter's concern, but a shocking and predatory abuse of this court and of the petitioner's own father." She didn't stop there. Effective immediately, this court orders a temporary freeze on all known assets belonging to Jessica and Tom Miller. Furthermore, I am referring this entire case file, including the evidence of financial malfeasance and forgery, to the District Attorney's Office for immediate criminal investigation." The finality in her voice was absolute. The war was over. Months later, the late spring sun warmed my shoulders as I knelt in the garden, the rich smell of soil filling the air. The legal battles were behind me now, a storm that had passed, leaving a scarred but clean landscape. Jessica and Tom were facing a future dictated by the consequences of their choices, a future that no longer involved me. I heard the back door slide open and looked up to see my grandson Leo walking towards me. At 16, he had his mother's sharp intelligence in his eyes, but his grandmother's kindness in his smile. He sat on the grass beside me. I wiped my hands on my trousers and reached for a crisp manila envelope I had placed on the garden bench. I handed it to him. "There's something I want you to have," I said. He opened it and pulled out the document inside. His eyes scanned the first few lines, the Leo Miller Educational Trust. "Your grandmother," I began, my voice thick with emotion, "wanted to make sure you had the best possible start in life. She set everything up for you. Things got complicated for a while, but we fixed it. Sam and I. This is hers. This is for you." Leo looked from the paper to my face, his eyes shining with unshed tears. He didn't say anything. He just leaned forward and wrapped his arms around me, his grip tight and strong. I held him close, my own eyes looking up past the blooming roses, past the tall oak tree to the vast, clear blue sky. In that moment, a profound sense of peace settled over me. I had lost a daughter to a darkness I could never have imagined. But in fighting my way back into the light, I had saved the future of my grandson. I had honored my wife's memory, and I had finally, truly reclaimed myself. The battle was over. The silence in my heart was no longer one of grief, but of a quiet, hard-won peace. This story serves as a stark reminder that true strength is often forged in silence. It reveals how easily blind trust can be weaponized by greed, turning family into the cruelest of adversaries. The ultimate lesson is not about revenge, but about reclamation. It teaches that dignity once stolen can be reclaimed through the methodical pursuit of facts. Victory is not won with anger, but with patience, evidence, and the unwavering resolve to let the truth, no matter how painful, speak for itself. True justice is found not in shouting, but in the quiet, undeniable weight of the record. Don't forget to share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and click on the next video on your screen to continue the journey.